and thank you everyone for joining me. We're going to be talking all about nutrition and fertility. Okay, oh, there we go. So whenever I start any presentation, I always like to just talk a little bit about naturopathic medicine because very often most people have never even heard that term. So what is naturopathic medicine? Naturopathic medicine is a patient-specific system of medicine which utilizes natural therapies to stimulate the body's own healing potential. And I feel that we are best governed by our 6 principles. So the first is first do no harm, which is very similar to all types of medicine. Then prevention is the best medicine. The healing power of nature. So we believe that there's this underlying intelligence in our body that helps to promote healing. Identifying and treating the cause rather than just masking symptoms. Doctor is teacher, so very much what I'm doing right now, giving this presentation, but even in my practice, always educating my patients more about their condition and then treating the whole person. So we don't just look at what is going on physically with the patient, but also the environment, stressors, every other aspect that could be impacting health. So why is nutrition so important for fertility? So first of all, nutrition and fertility is not a newfangled concept. In fact, actually traditional societies put a special emphasis on special diets. The ancient Greeks, for example, recommended eliminating alcohol for women who were preparing to get pregnant. The ancient Romans recommended an eye of hyena with dill and licorice. So I'm not really going to recommend that latter one, but the first one I think is still applies even to today. But looking more about modern times. So one of the big factors is that overconsumption of trans fats, refined carbohydrates, and animal proteins can all have a negative impact on ovulation. And I'll get a little bit more into specifics about that, but mainly these types of foods are going to have a negative impact on blood sugar, insulin, and inflammation. Then also key vitamins and minerals are essential for a healthy reproductive system. In fact, things like iron, zinc, iodine, and folate, it's really important, and also vitamin D. It's not just about supplementing with these when you're pregnant, but it's actually really important that those levels are at optimal levels prior to even getting pregnant. And then lastly, being overweight and or obese greatly impacts fertility in both men and women. And I'm going to get into more specifics with that. So first, looking at overweight and obesity as it pertains to women and their fertility. So believe it or not, obesity is actually one of the primary causes of infertility in about 6% of couples. One of the big factors are the increased time for conception, decreased ovulation. And so the decrease in ovulation is typically due to an increase in insulin. And so the insulin causes the ovaries to actually produce more male-like hormones, things like testosterone. And that then impacts or causes the ovaries to not release an egg. You're also going to be seeing increased rates of miscarriage. And there's actually a decrease by about like 5% in conception with each unit increase in BMI. So what are some of the other reasons for this? So as BMI, so that's body mass index, increases, this actually affects 2 specific hormones. One is leptin and the other is adenoprolactin. So these are both from fat cells. So first, this causes an increase in leptin. So leptin is released from our fat cells, and it signals to a part of our brain called the hypothalamus to send signals to feel satiated, no longer hungry. Now the problem is when leptin increases, it causes estrogen, which is one of our female hormones, and progesterone to decrease. So the ovaries actually produce less of these hormones. And then on the other side, uh, adiponectin actually decreases. This is also produced in the fat cells, has a different function. It's there to break down fatty acids. When it is low, unfortunately, it's going to actually be increasing insulin, which then is going to affect another hormone called sex hormone binding globulin to decrease, and that also is going to increase more testosterone. So those are some of the factors when it comes to weight in women. Now, for men, weight also has an impact. So basically, BMIs over 25 can have a negative impact on sperm motility. So that's the ability for sperm to move, lower sperm counts, and more abnormalities, so strangely formed sperm. Part of this is due to more weight. You're going to be having higher temperatures on the testicles, which is going to negatively impact sperm. Also, with more body mass, specifically fat body mass in men, you're going to be seeing less testosterone. So it's almost like the flip side of what we see in women, and actually more estrogen, because an enzyme called aromatase activity is going to be increasing, and that's going to be basically turning more of that testosterone, unfortunately, into estrogen. So also, so back to kind of like some just more dietary things. So insulin resistance. So you can have insulin resistance even if you are not overweight. And so basically what we mean by insulin resistance is that our body tissues are less responsive to insulin. So basically target tissues would include liver and muscle and fat tissue. So even when we have circulating blood sugar, insulin just is unable to do its job. Some of them kind of like if you don't know if you have insulin resistance, and again, this can actually affect women who are not overweight. So key markers would be elevated triglycerides, so this is over 150, elevated glucose, blood glucose, fasting blood glucose of 110, elevated insulin levels above 10, and lastly, hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker basically of your blood glucoses for about 3 months. And so that would be 5.7 or above. And so why does that affect fertility? So very kind of similar to when we were looking at obesity, but the insulin is going to have a direct effect on the ovaries. So again, you're having more circulating insulin because in order for the tissues to get the glucose they need, just more insulin has to be released. And what you're going to be noticing is you're going to be having hormonal imbalances, basically more testosterone, and it is also going to have a negative impact on ovulation. So the ability for the ovaries to produce and release an egg. And you're going to also just see in general, even then like on the male side of things with insulin resistance, it also has a negative impact on sperm. It's also going to be decreasing testosterone. And in fact, actually, there is a higher risk of miscarriage, mostly due to difficulty with fertilization. And in an indirect way, insulin resistance can have an impact on erectile function. So it can be one of the things that might cause erectile dysfunction, which of course is going to have an impact on fertility. So oxidative stress and fertility. So what do we mean by oxidative stress? So our bodies every day are forming these things called free radicals, and this could be both from natural biochemical processes happening in our body. It could also be due to stress or poor nutrition, environmental hazards. So you have all these free radicals that are building up in the body. And then you also have, hopefully, antioxidants in the body that are fighting these free radicals. Now, the problem is when you have more free radicals than what the antioxidants can handle, or you don't have enough antioxidants, and then you're going to be having oxidative stress, and this is going to basically affect us more on the cellular level and causing cellular damage. Now, why that's so crucial when it comes to fertility is fertility happens because of cells, our oocytes, which are our eggs, and our sperm. So these are all cells, and we want to make sure that they're not incurring a lot of cellular damage. Why this has anything even to do with nutrition is that one, we want to make sure that we're not having things in our body that are going to be increasing free radicals, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're getting enough nutrients, specifically vitamin C, E, A, and a mineral called selenium. These are all antioxidants. So having a diet rich in antioxidants is going to help reduce free radicals, because again, free radicals are really going to be causing a lot of, this is one of the contributing factors to diminished ovarian reserve. Yes, aging also has an impact, but even in women of advanced age who are looking to get pregnant, making sure again that your antioxidant status is robust is going to do a lot when it comes to fertility. Now, looking at back to overweight and obesity and how it can impact fertility treatments. So superovulation IUI, so that's basically IUI with some medications. So we are seeing lower pregnancy rates with women who have BMIs over 28. Obese women typically have lower peak estradiol levels, so estrogen levels, so they are going to be requiring a higher dose of these medications and a longer duration for these medications. In general, we're seeing lower conception rates for obese women, and yes, we look a lot at BMI as a marker of obesity, but something else to really consider is the waist to hip ratio. So how much, so basically the more abdominal weight you have is going to have a negative impact on the success of IUI. And then with IVF, we're seeing again lower pregnancy rates in obese women versus women of normal weight. Again, more medications required for stimulation. We're also seeing an increased risk of cycle cancellation due to poor follicular development, fewer eggs in general being retrieved, mostly not necessarily because not enough eggs are produced, but with the difficulty in actually retrieving the eggs themselves due to where the ovaries are situated in the abdominal cavity. We're seeing more immature eggs versus mature eggs, so less likely to produce a successful embryo. And then finally, just more likelihood of preterm birth. So what about donor eggs? So donor eggs, when we know the quality of the egg is fantastic, hopefully, even in donor eggs, being overweight and obese can impact the success of the transfer. So you're seeing about 21% reduction in live births, even with donor eggs. But there is good news. So the good news is that weight loss helps. And basically, oops, let me go back. When infertility is due to weight, spontaneous consumption will occur in about 70% of women if the weight is normalized, and as little as a 5 to 10% reduction in body weight can dramatically improve chances of pregnancy. So when we say 5 to 10% reduction in body weight, we're referring to people that are overweight, or it's not, sorry, normal weight or underweight. So what are some of the challenges with weight loss and fertility? So definitely you want to avoid rapid weight loss. And so rapid weight loss is defined about 8.8% of body weight loss in about 6 weeks. So that's basically over 2 pounds per week. So definitely want to make sure no more than 2 pounds a week with the weight loss. So you're going to be just, again, seeing less. It'll affect egg quality and it will affect fertilization rates. So definitely avoiding rapid weight loss. But the other tricky thing with weight loss, unfortunately, it sometimes is difficult to maintain weight loss, but it is important to reduce pregnancy and birth complications, specifically when we're thinking about things like gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, which is basically hypertension, and just the reality in general, not even anything to do with fertility, but only about 15% of dieters are able to maintain long-term weight loss. So what do I recommend for most of my patients in my practice when it comes to diet for fertility? And this is not even just diet for fertility for my overweight or my obese patients, but most of my patients in general. It's really the Mediterranean diet, and it really seems to be the fertility diet that works. It's also the one that is most backed by science, and we all like science, so it is my go-to for my patients. So with the Mediterranean diet, so first just like looking at the Mediterranean diet for weight loss. So you are definitely seeing similar results with Mediterranean diet as you would say, for example, the low carb or low fat diet. In fact, actually you're seeing not only a similar weight loss, but better long-term outcomes. Many people even basically able to maintain a 9 to 22 pound weight loss within a year. And it also just like a slow, moderate weight loss, specifically around abdominal fat. And mostly the reason why it can be more effective than, for example, other weight loss plans. And again, it doesn't even have to be a weight loss diet. But the big things, it's a way of life that most people can hopefully maintain. So there's a lot of flexibility. So there's a lot more, it's a lot easier to follow than other diets. It also is very satiating because of one, incorporation of high quality carbohydrates, like high in fiber, lots of fruits and vegetables, and the olive oil components, and also just the wide variety of foods that you can have. So feeling less deprived, specifically in social situations. Okay, so again, the Mediterranean diet is not just all about weight loss. So why is it, what are some of the benefits, specifically when we're thinking about fertility? So there's, again, it's pretty well studied. So in some studies showing about like 44% less difficulty in conceiving naturally, also increased rates of pregnancy with IVF in comparison with control, basically a 66% better chance, specifically, again, when incorporation of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, fish, and olive oil. And a big part of this is, again, how much, we talked earlier about antioxidants and certain nutrients. So again, we're seeing higher levels of zinc, folate, selenium, iodine, vitamin B6. It also improves blood sugar and lipid levels. So lipid levels meaning cholesterol levels. And then again, also helping patients to really maintain a proper weight. So this is my version of the Mediterranean diet for mom or future mom. Okay, so first looking at protein. So one of the big pillars of the Mediterranean diet is seafood, fish. So recommendation would be about 2 to 3 times a week. And choosing more of your fatty fish, things are really high in omega-3s. And of course, unfortunately, we do live in this toxic, polluted world with there's mercury and PCBs, and this can get into the fish. And this actually also has, unfortunately, can have a negative impact in both pregnancy and fertility. So one of the things that I'm always telling my patients about is the Safe Seafood Guide that gets put out every year by the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's completely free. You can go right on their website. They have it for all different regions, and using that as a guide of how you select your fish. Now, one of my personal favorite fish to include, because it's high in omega-3s, also it's a good source of calcium, is sardines. And if you think they're disgusting, which I used to think they were disgusting, you can actually go on my YouTube channel, and I have a couple interesting hacks to make sardines more tasty. And believe it or not, my 2-year-old actually loves sardines, and maybe because I ate a lot of those during my pregnancy. Also for proteins, incorporation of plant-based proteins, so beans, legumes. If you tolerate soy, things like tofu, edamame, poultry and meat, you can still have, but try to keep that to a minimum. And then omega-3 eggs. So I usually will recommend 1 or 2 daily. They're a great source of protein. And I'm actually going to say cholesterol. The reason why I'm going to say cholesterol is that we actually do need cholesterol. Specifically, cholesterol is like the building blocks of our hormones. I have had some patients that had some fertility issues because their LDL, which is like the quote unquote bad cholesterol, was too low, and actually helping improve LDL levels, helped with pregnancy. The other thing that eggs have a lot is choline, and choline is going to be really important for babies' brains. So eggs are our friends. Vegetables. So I really like vegetables, and so a couple things about vegetables. High source of antioxidants, vitamin A and C and E, selenium, got a lot of folate. And so I do try to encourage as much variety as possible. So some key vegetables to make sure to be including on mostly a daily basis would be your dark leafy greens, great source again of folate and vitamin A. And then your cruciferous vegetables, also called brassicas. And so this is your broccoli and your Brussels sprouts, your cauliflower. So these are going to be really beneficial for detoxification, hormone balancing, which is all going to help with fertility. Then our grains. So grains and starchy vegetables. Specifically, again, we're thinking about grains that have at least 2 grams of fiber per serving. And, I try to push a little bit more towards the gluten-free grains whenever possible, things like quinoa and millet, amaranth, and buckwheat. Healthy fats. So again, the Mediterranean diet, like one of the big pillars is olive oil, which is a monounsaturated fatty acid. So typically about like 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil daily, but also nuts and for avocados. Avocados are great source of vitamin E. Also have hemp and flaxseed there, great omega-3s. Hemp seeds in particular also have a lot of protein, but also just nuts and seeds in general, I will recommend with my patients. Pumpkin seeds are great. And so most of our seeds are going to be very high again in vitamin E, great antioxidant. And then I think maybe some people already know, but pumpkin seeds are very high in zinc, and zinc is really important for fertility, actually for both men and women, but I'll talk a little bit more about men in later slides. So fruits, again, great source of antioxidants, and we love our dark purple grapes and blueberries. So these have a strong antioxidant called anthocyanidins. These are also great, lots of flavonoids. So love, love, love our berries. And then lastly would be full fat dairy. So I guess like that's like the Greek, the feta cheese, the yogurts. I always usually have more of a preference definitely on the fermented dairy. Of course, this is only if you tolerate dairy. If you have like lactose intolerance or you know you're allergic to dairy, then you definitely don't want to be having dairy. And why the preference for full fat? And it mostly actually has to do with the natural hormonal composition of milk. So milk is used to feed a growing baby cow or sheep, and it's actually chock full of hormones with, so what's interesting is that estrogen, progesterone, these are all what we call fat soluble hormones versus our androgens, things like testosterone are all water soluble. So when you remove the fat, you're basically just getting a big glass of testosterone. I mean, probably not that simple, but so having the fat there helps to balance. Also has a less negative impact on blood sugar and insulin. So here's like more about the Mediterranean diet for dad. It's relatively similar to mom. Again, we're really encouraging fish over other types of proteins. Typically with dads, I don't recommend as many eggs as I do mom, and I a little bit of a higher emphasis on plant-based proteins if possible. Again, areas that are vegetables. Again, we really want to make sure that we're getting those great antioxidants, which is so important for sperm health. Grains and starches, and I would say overall the serving suggestions. It really, I think it depends with you know your size and your whether or not you have like a weight loss goal or not. And then again, our fruits. I don't necessarily recommend dairy so much for men. It doesn't seem to be so beneficial, but these are the main groups that I really push with my male patients. And again, here's our healthy fats, really, really very important, specifically the omega-3s, which you would be getting both from the fish, but again, also with some of the flaxseed and hemp seeds. Okay, so wait a minute, what about the keto diet? So maybe some of you have heard of the keto diet, maybe you're like following the keto diet. I have a stick of butter there because I think a lot of people don't understand what the keto diet really is, because it's not necessarily a low carb diet as much as it is a high fat diet. So when practiced normally, you're seeing about 80% fat, 15% protein, and 5% carbohydrate. And basically what the ketogenic diet does is it changes what our body runs on. So actually, typically our body mostly runs on glucose, which is what we get from carbohydrate. But this diet, because of the high fat, basically we're now running on fat and ketones. So ketones is, again, when we don't have glucose, so it actually kind of mimics what our body goes through during periods of fasting or starvation. So it just basically changing what our body is fueled on. Now, when we're thinking about the keto diet and fertility, there actually is good evidence that it can help with fertility, but only under very specific cases. So as of today, the research only shows improvement for overweight and obese women with PCOS. And I wanted to just cite a couple of studies. I would say if you feel that the ketogenic diet might be key for you, I definitely recommend working with registered dietitian or someone who, or a naturopathic doctor who has experience with the ketogenic diet. So first study, so basically 8 patients, again, obese PCOS patients, followed the keto diet for 8 weeks and then followed it with, so this is the test group, 8 weeks on a low calorie diet. Meanwhile, we have the control group following the Mediterranean diet for 16 weeks. And both groups had improvements in spontaneous ovulation, but the keto group had more. In another study, following women on the keto diet for 120 days, so that's like 4 months, the ones that were following the keto diet had more pregnancies and live births. And then lastly, in another study, 12 obese PCOS patients with multiple failed IVF cycles followed the keto diet for 14 weeks. Their ovarian outcomes actually remained the same. So the same number of antral follicles, there was no change in AMH and anti-Mullerian hormone or the amount of eggs that were extracted, but 8 out of the 12 women achieved pregnancy with embryo transfer after the 14 weeks on the keto diet, and 7 of those 8 all had live births. Now again, and the big contributing factors of why the ketogenic diet might work for this specific population is basically due to improvements in insulin resistance, sex hormones, and weight loss. And again, there has not been any evidence that the ketogenic diet would be beneficial for patients that do not meet these characteristics. Now, actually, isn't being plant-based the new thing? So yeah, probably you're hearing a lot about like plant-based this and all these like vegan and vegetarian diets. So a couple things about that. So there's like some mixed, it's a mixed how well being vegan or vegetarian can support fertility. So one of the pitfalls of these diets is that there is a higher incidence of iron, zinc, vitamin D, and B12 deficiencies. I'd say specifically with the iron and B12, it's very hard to get those nutrients naturally from plant-based foods. These are mostly found in animal-based foods. So unless you're supplementing, it can be very hard to get that from a vegan or a vegetarian diet. Now, there have been some studies showing that the vegan vegetarian diet can have a negative impact on the menstrual cycle, but others have not concluded that. And really the big differentiator in this thing is really the quality of the diet. So one can be vegan, eating like lentils and tempeh and quinoa and kale and flax seeds and like that kind of vegan person. But then you can also be getting chips and ice cream and cookies. So basically, the higher the adherence to a plant-based diet, when it like a healthy plant-based diet took less time to get pregnant than those who followed a unhealthy plant-based diet. And this is very much again like higher intake of fast foods and sugary drinks. This is kind of like very similar to earlier things that we talked about as far as like when we think about like blood sugar levels and insulin. Kind of similar with men, you're seeing kind of like a little bit of positive benefits to more of a plant-based, but then also some negatives. So mostly improvements in sperm parameters, but depending again like on what the person is eating, you could actually see like lower DHA, which is a type of omega-3 fatty acid in some men that follow one of these diets, which can actually affect the cellular membranes of sperm. So here's some other dietary considerations. And before I turn to the next slide, because I realize when I create this slide, it tells you already what it is, but I know you can't really answer a question, but what is the worst food for women who are trying to get pregnant? And it's actually breakfast cereals. And the reason is whole breakfast cereals are most of them, depending on the quality, obviously, are very high glycemic foods. And so anything that's going to be very high glycemic is going to have an impact on ovulation because of its effect on insulin. So if you have like, like trying to think like specifically if you're having like Captain Crunch or even just like Rice Krispies or something like very like void of really any real nutrition except for some carbohydrate, and then you put some skim milk or even like oat milk or something like that, it's really not going to be benefiting you as far as like a high quality breakfast. So like back to like so these types of foods, you're going to be seeing like basically a twofold increase in ovulatory infertility. So it's infertility due to lack of ovulation. With again, like breakfast cereals and sodas definitely being the worst. So anything again, like very high in sugar, low in fiber, your low glycemic foods are all going to have a negative impact on ovulation, which is going to impact your ability to get pregnant. And a big part of it because it spikes insulin, which is then going to decrease sex hormone binding globulin, which is then going to increase testosterone, and you're going to have reduced ovulation. The other food in this like category, so your trans fats, are also going to be interfering with ovulation and having an impact, negative impact on insulin. And then for dad, so basically your processed snacks are not your partner or your sperm donor or whoever it is, the male side of the fertility is not going to be the friend. So this even things like graham crackers and pretzels. And it's not just because they are refined carbohydrates that are going to cause insulin spikes and impact blood sugar, but they often contain cottonseed oil. So cottonseed oil is typically used more in your conventional snack products. A lot of more like your organic brands now use more like olive oil or avocado oil, but cottonseed oil actually has a natural spermicide in it called 𝗖𝗹𝗹. In fact, 𝗖𝗹𝗹 was being investigated as a type of like male birth control. And so 𝗖𝗹𝗹 inhibits sperm function and is going to, again, it's going to impact fertility. The other things that also, again, like with these snacks, too much saturated fat, hydrogenated fats, these are going to decrease the fluidity of the sperm, like cellular membranes, which is going to affect the sperm's ability to move. And then on the flip side of that, so your polyunsaturated fat. So this is your olive oil and your avocados and your fish. These are all actually going to improve sperm's ability to form and move and its activity. Okay, so caffeine. So does caffeine have an impact on fertility? So full disclosure, I love caffeine, and I drink at least one. I usually just only drink 1 cup of coffee. So I'm a big proponent of caffeine, and for the most part, caffeine does not have that much of an impact on fertility, as long as it is not excessive. So basically, as long as you're not having more than 300 milligrams daily, it's not going to really have any impact on fertility. In fact, actually, many of our caffeinated foods or caffeine containing foods are rich in antioxidants. So coffee and tea and dark chocolate all have these flavonoids that are actually really good for fertility. But just to be more specific, so basically having about like 300 milligrams daily can reduce fertility. If we're looking at IVF per cycle, about 27%, and then levels about 500 milligrams daily, about 50%. And these numbers are also worsened when you add smoking into the mix. And I added to this slide basically the caffeine content of some specific foods, beverages, and also Excedrin, if you didn't know how much caffeine was in Excedrin. Now, the next slide, so definitely alcohol, unfortunately, I would say is not going to be the best when it comes to fertility. And I know that some people's favorite part of the Mediterranean diet is the idea that there's like red wine. But again, alcohol is really not going to be the best for fertility. And a lot of the positive things about, like, for example, red wine, the bioflavonoids, the antioxidants, specifically resveratrol, you can really get that in other foods. So there's really you don't really need to have wine to get the benefit. And I would say this is also going to be mostly important For women of more advanced age, women in their 40s trying to get pregnant, it's even going to be even more important because of the extent of oxidative stress that's already happening in the body. So that might be a time to like completely abstain. But basically, the main reason why alcohol is not going to be the best, one, it is actually toxic to our ovaries and testes, so that's the testicles. It is going to impact hormones, so basically reducing estrogen and testosterone, which is going to disrupt menstrual cycles. And then the bigger thing is really the release of the reactivated oxygen species, the free radicals, which are just going to be causing more oxidative stress on our beautiful mitochondria, which are like the energy sources of our cells, specifically, again, like our eggs, our oocytes, our cells, and they're causing damage to our cells. And so just one study in particular following Danish women for 6 months and basically showing that 5 drinks per week with a 39% decreased chance of conception, and then 10 drinks per week, so 66% lower chance of conception. In my practice, if alcohol is something that still makes sense in my patient's lifestyle, typically, usually I'll recommend no more than 3 drinks per week and no more than 1 drink daily. So that seems to be typically as safe, but I would say if you have very poor ovarian reserve, it's probably better just to abstain altogether, because you're gonna have to abstain anyway once you're pregnant. So might as well start now. Okay, so that was my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any. And also, if you want to go further into the diet and you want some recipes and some meal plans, you can email me, and I have a 7-day fertility diet meal plan that is both one for you and one for your partner, and or you can also mix and share. So feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to share it with you.